Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel Powerful Perspectives. In this video, I'd like to share a paradox with you that I've come to recognize over the past little while. And that is a paradox about competences. I think it's interesting to reflect and to notice in different areas of my life as I've kind of paid attention to my own competencies and those of others, like what people are good at and what people are maybe not so good at, what we have talents for and what we have weaknesses for. Something that I've kind of noticed as I've reflected and observed these things is that we tend to overestimate how good we are at the things that we think we're good at. And we tend to underestimate how good we are at the things we think that we're bad at. So it kind of goes both ways. It's this double-edged sword. We think that we're worse at the things that we feel bad at than we actually are. We're actually better oftentimes than we think we are in the things that we feel like we're not really that great at, that we feel like we're kind of bad at. And the things that we feel like we're really strong with, like the things that we see as our strengths, are often not actually as strong as we think they are. And there's some principles I think that are kind of laying behind this, right? There are some things that feed into this phenomenon. And I think what happens is with the things that we feel good at, the things that just come more naturally to us, that we just kind of maybe have a knack for or a talent for, just intrinsically, it's easier for us. Those things, because they come more easily, because we already feel like we have a lot of it in the bag, like it just kind of, happens on its own, or we don't need to try as hard. What happens is we let up on our effort. We tend to not put in as much effort. We don't try as hard because we don't have to, right? Like, if we're looking at other people around us and comparing our performance in those things to that of other people, we already see that we're ahead. Whether we're ahead in our actual performance or in the product or like in our actual like what we're putting out, or whether it's not necessarily such a huge difference, but the effort that it takes to put in order to get that response, in order to get that result, is a lot smaller, right? Like maybe the result or the product that we come up with is similar in terms of its quality to that of other people around us, but the difference is just how much it requires in terms of energy, in terms of resources, in terms of just how easily it comes, right? Sometimes like we're just able to provide like the same amount of quality with a lot less effort than some other people who just really have to put a lot more into it. And so there's both kinds of scenario, right? But really the result is the same. There's a difference in how much is required, how much you need to put in order to meet and even like exceed the status quo. And those things that come more easily, that don't require as much effort, we tend to kind of put them on the back burner. We don't really, we don't worry about them as much because we know that we can just kind of float on by, right? We know that that thing is already kind of taken care of. And so we kind of tend to focus our energy instead on those things that don't come as easily or that aren't as seamless, right? Those things that really require more of our attention and effort consciously, because they're the hard things for us, right? So because of this, like, we don't tend to push ourselves in the things that we feel that we're good at. Or at least, even if we do push ourselves a little bit, we definitely don't push ourselves as much as we do in those areas where we feel that we're lacking, right? And that only makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to spend more attention and energy on those areas that need more improvement, right? I mean, it's pragmatic, but the principle still stands that we tend to kind of ignore or kind of put on the back burner or set aside those things that we feel that we're good at. And what often happens is it's easy just to kind of overlook them entirely and to put minimal effort and not even really take it seriously in terms of pushing yourself, in terms of really trying to succeed and enlarge and grow in those areas, because we just don't really see the need for it. And so that motivation isn't there. And so because of this, in those areas where we feel strong, where we feel comfortable, where we feel confident, we kind of get a little lazy. We don't push ourselves. We don't tend to try to like discover what more we can do or how much farther we can take it, because we get comfortable with those things. And so then what happens is our growth kind of just stagnates. It's like the principle of plateau, right? Like you kind of reach a certain area where you feel comfortable and where you feel like you have enough. You're satisfied with where you're at, and so you don't feel the pull. You don't feel the tug to put in more and to push it a little bit further. You just don't have that motivation. And so you just get lazy and complacent. You just kind of plateau. And I think that happens with us a lot in those areas that we feel strong with, where we feel like, okay, like we have it. We don't push ourselves. And because of that we don't learn, we don't grow, we don't progress in those things. They just kind of plateau, they just kind of stay there. And then other people who maybe have to try a lot harder and put in a lot more effort, they can actually tend to pull ahead because they care more. It matters more to them. So they put in the effort and they grow more, and they're not as complacent, they're not as lazy. And so even though it comes easier to us, they will tend to make more progress and to actually learn and actually pull ahead of us sometimes, simply because their approach and their perspective, their mindset, their attitude is completely different than ours. And so we tend to miss out. We tend to not be as good as we think we are. We kind of overshoot or overestimate our ability in the areas that we feel are our strengths, because we overlook the areas for improvement. We underestimate how much there is still to learn, still to improve. We just kind of ignore or overlook those things, and we tend not to take those opportunities. Whereas other people for whom those things are a bit more of a struggle, they are hyper aware of the areas for improvement and for learning and growth, and they take those a lot more seriously, and thus they tend to achieve them and pull forward in them. On the flip side, and I mean, you can already kind of start to see the flip side just through talking about these two groups, right? On the flip side, though, in those areas where we feel like we are really lacking, where we feel like we're really weak, we just don't have the same skill, we don't have the same talent, it doesn't come as easily to us, like we're just really bad in this certain thing. In those things, we tend to just hyper focus into them, right? Sometimes, and I don't want to like completely ignore the fact that sometimes like some things we just ignore completely, right? We don't touch it with like a 10-foot pole. We don't even go near it because we just say, okay, like that's really not for me. So some things we do tend to avoid, and we just don't even go there. But the things that we care about, or sometimes they're not even things that we ourselves care about, but they are things that are valued by other people around us, by our society, by our culture, by our families, our friends, our social circles, by the society, like the norms of the place where we live. these things are maybe just held in high regard, or are really valued and appreciated and seen as important, even if we personally don't feel that way ourselves intrinsically. Wherever we feel or recognize a sense of importance, a sense of value, and that pricks something in our hearts, like that, we feel it, like we identify with it, we internalize that somehow. If we internalize importance or value to something, then it's going to be important to us to an extent. Like, it's going to be hard for us to forget that. And if we feel like we are not good in that thing that we feel is important, then we're still going to care about it, and we're going to feel like we need to put the effort in. Even if we don't want to put the effort in, even if we resent putting the effort in, even if we think that, in an ideal world, in an ideal society, this shouldn't even be valued as much as it is, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You have to face the reality of the situation, and at least on a subconscious level, you're going to feel some guilt for not working on it, because it is going to be something that you identify as being important and that needs to be improved. It's always going to be in the back of your head. And so that is going to push you to spend time on it and to focus on it and to try to improve at various levels of diligence and consistency and focus and attention, right? But it's still going to be there, and it's not going to let you like forget about it, really. Your attention is always going to circle back to that thing that just is a weakness, that thing that just you don't get, or that just doesn't make sense, or that just is hard. You're always going to circle back to it. It's never going to leave you alone. You're not going to be able to ignore it. And that's the difference, right? With someone who's good at it, it's easy to ignore, right? Because they already have it taken care of. But for you, in that area of weakness, in that area where you just don't feel strong, that weakness, that deficiency, that challenge, that whatever you want to call it, it's always going to circle back in your mind. And for that reason, it's always going to be there, torturing you, bothering you, to an extent. And that is going to be enough motivation, enough to incite you to action. It's going to require attention and effort. You're going to tend to just do something about it, because you can't sit still and be comfortable with it. You'll feel restless. And so that, like, the very circumstance, just, it pulls effort out of us. It requires a certain level of engagement that we just can't really avoid. And so we engage with it. And what happens is, through that engagement, we make progress, we improve. But because we have this mindset that we're not good in this thing, or we hate this thing, or we resent this thing, or this is so much easier for other people than it is for us, that mindset colors how we perceive our progress. And so even though we learn and we make mistakes, but we grow from them, like, even though our work isn't perfect, and even though, like, what little progress we do make comes with so much struggle that it just seems to, like, overshadow the progress, and we don't see the progress, like, we miss the forest for the trees. We still make progress, and step by step, like, we grow, we progress, we learn, and yeah, it comes at a price, and we don't often notice it. We overshoot it, we overlook it, we dismiss it. It's not like we ignore it, because it's not really even catching our attention sometimes. We just don't recognize it. But it's there. And other people will look at us sometimes and say, you know what? you're so good in this thing, or like you're doing it. And we look at that, like we have other people maybe compliment us in this area, like you did a really good job here. And we look at that and we think, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I'm not good at this thing. Like, you shouldn't be complimenting me. Like, I'm terrible. Like, this isn't good. But other people are recognizing the competence that we don't recognize in ourselves, right? And that competence is there simply because, like, our circumstances require that engagement. They require that effort. And we can't leave it alone. So we are going to make progress. We are going to learn. We are going to grow. And that is going to result unavoidably in some level of ability, some level of competence. And it's hard for us to recognize and acknowledge and accept that about ourselves. But that doesn't change the fact that it's there. So I'll give personal examples from my own life to help illustrate this. There are a few things that I love, a few passions that I have, in terms of just hobbies and whatever. One big passion that I have is music. I absolutely love music. I love listening to music. I love singing. I love dance. I love musical theater. I love playing musical instruments. Yeah, just really anything that involves music. I'm there. I love it. And from a young age, music came pretty easily to me. It was one of the subjects in school that I understood a lot more easily. And I had a bit of an aptitude for it. I learned to play piano mostly by ear. Like, I had sporadic lessons here and there, but nothing terribly consistent. And so I learned how to play piano by ear when I was a child, and then later in school, when music was taught as a formal subject, then I learned about theory. I learned like how to read music, and I just added that to my audio, like my my competencies like by ear, and it just gave like a system for understanding, and I excelled. And I was one of the top, like, in my classes, in my music classes all throughout school, like both in elementary school and in high school. I really excelled, and not only within my instrument, I played the clarinet in school, and so I excelled among other clarinetists, but like also among other musicians in my classes. I was one of the top performers in my class. And I say that not to boast, like I'm not saying that to brag or to look for any kind of recognition. I'm saying that to give an example of something that I was good at, something that came easily to me, something that it clicked, I understood it. It just felt like it was second nature to me. But because of that, I got complacent, right? And there were others that, there were others in my classes who, like my music classes, for whom it didn't come as naturally, but they tried harder because of it. And in some instances, they performed better than I did, simply because they took it more seriously, right? Like I loved music. I hated practicing. And I was able to get by and do well without a lot of practice, but there were issues, there were technical issues in playing my instrument that I didn't overcome as well as some other people did, because I resented putting in the effort. And I didn't enjoy, I didn't want to work so hard because I enjoyed the process. Like, I enjoyed the instrument, I enjoyed the music, and I loved it as a hobby, and it was an outlet for me, and I didn't want to make it a source of work. And so, yeah, I got complacent, I got lazy, and I didn't push myself as hard as I could have, as much as I could have. And that had a negative impact on how far I was able to take it. And how much I was able to learn and improve. I did learn, I did improve. I passed all of my classes, I had stellar grades. But I could have done more. And I overlooked that. I underestimated. I overestimated my competency and underestimated my areas for improvement. On the flip side, I hate numbers. I am not a mathematician. I don't enjoy math. I don't enjoy sciences too much. I just do not think in a very analytical, sciencey, numbery kind of way. That's just not how my mind works on default. Or even though I am able to do it to an extent, I don't enjoy it, right? And it doesn't come naturally to me. It doesn't come easily to me. And so I remember, growing up, like just through school, math was one of the subjects that I struggled with the most. And then when I got into university, I chose to study psychology. And I didn't realize that a large part of psychology, at least in university studies as you're preparing, for your degree and everything, for your diploma, a significant part is statistics and research. Because they want to, when you go to university, they want to train you in kind of a well-rounded way, right? Because there's lots of different paths that you can take with a psychology degree. You can go into research, you can go into clinical practice, you can go into teaching, and the degree is meant to prepare you kind of for all of these, right? To just kind of keep your options open. And so even though my passion is being in the room with a person, like being in a clinic, just really getting into the nitty-gritties of therapy and just helping people one-on-one or maybe in a group setting as well, but just being there in the office with a person, that's where I want to be. That's where my passion is. Originally I had no interest in research. That interest grew a little bit later as I was forced to engage in it throughout my university studies. But definitely I am not interested in statistics. That is not a passion of mine. It is not something that I enjoy. I really had to force myself to pay attention and to try to learn statistics, which are based in math, but it's a whole other language than math. I mean, they're similar, but they're very different as well. And yeah, I struggled. I struggled to learn the material because it didn't come easily to me. But because it didn't come easily to me, I paid more attention to it and I put more effort into it. And I actually excelled. I did fairly well in my classes. I passed my statistics classes, not easily. And I didn't perform as well in those areas as I did, for example, in writing. I can do writing, even professional or research-based writing, super easily. I can write all day. But the stats side of it, that does not come as easily. So I didn't perform as well as those areas that were strengths for me. And I didn't perform as easily as those areas that are strengths for me. But I did perform a lot better than I thought I would. I remember getting to the end of the semester and looking at my grades and just being baffled. I was like, how did I get that? I don't deserve that. That doesn't seem reflective of how good I feel I am in that subject, right? And then one additional level that I'll kind of add on top of this is towards the end or the second half of my undergraduate degree, I served on some research teams. And again, on a research team, there's different parts of research. There's writing elements. There's obviously the reading, doing the studies, finding different articles, different studies, and reading and processing and coding and all of that. But depending on the type of research that you're doing, if you're doing experimental research, or even if you're not, even if it's not necessarily experimental, but you're doing something like a like a meta-analysis, or like there's different areas in which stats are going to come into your research. And I wanted to avoid it at all costs, right? Like that is something that I wanted to pawn off onto someone else, someone who was more competent than I was with statistics, someone for whom it came more easily, and someone who maybe enjoyed it more than I did. But I remember in these, well, at least on one research team that I served on, I remember no one else wanted to do the statistics, and no one else felt competent. It was something that like everyone was wanting to avoid. And so I stepped up and I said that I would do it. And I didn't enjoy it, and it wasn't easy for me, but I did it. And I was shocked because of everyone on that research team. Now I'm talking about students here, right? Like the professor, the professor was with us, but a lot of like the grunt work of like, like doing the stats and all, like we were supposed to take care of that. And then our professor, like our supervisor would look over it and confirm and make sure that everything was okay. But actually doing it, that was on us. And so, yeah, I did not feel in any way confident in my abilities to do statistics, but I did them. And I found, because like I wasn't the only one who tried. Like there were others of my colleagues too who did like try to do some statistics as well, and like we kind of did them together. And I realized, you know what, as incompetent as I feel, and as much as I feel like this really isn't a strength, I'm still better than I think I am. Like I still understood the concepts a lot better than some of these other people, simply because maybe I was forced to spend more time with it. I was forced to focus on it more because I perceived it and lived it or experienced it as an area of weakness. And so I just kind of want to leave that with you, like, and see if maybe we can surprise ourselves, help us to be a little bit more humble and a little bit more critical of ourselves in those areas that we feel that we're strong. Take a step back and try to ask ourselves, is there still room for improvement? Yes, this comes more easily to me. Yes, I don't have to put in as much effort. Yes, I'm able to get this done a lot faster or a lot more easily, or even maybe put out a much better quality product than someone else. But that doesn't mean that you've reached the end, like that you've hit the top, like that. That doesn't mean that there isn't still room for improvement or growth. There always is. And I think it's those who recognize areas for growth in those areas that they are strong in. It's those who really become pro, like those who really do something amazing. And then on the flip side as well, to give ourselves some grace, to be a little bit patient, a little bit kinder towards ourselves in those areas where we feel like we just really don't hit par, that we just really don't measure up. To recognize that we are actually a lot better and a lot more competent in those areas of weakness than we give ourselves credit for. That doesn't mean that we're amazing. That doesn't mean that we are at the top of the pile, like that we're just stellar. But it does mean that we are a lot better than we give ourselves credit for. And if we can recognize that and find a little bit more of a balance between being humble in our strengths and being kind and patient and recognizing our progress and our weaknesses, then we might find a healthier balance and push ourselves in those areas where we're less likely to push ourselves, and to be a little bit kinder and recognize our successes in those areas where we push ourselves maybe a little bit too hard and maybe are a little bit too hard on ourselves. I hope you find that insightful, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.